Welcome to Small Talk Daily for Tuesday, April 7th, 2009. This morning we're going to add Ajax to our small web velocity application. So let's go back into the Notes application we've been looking at here. And we'll go into Classes, Notes List UI. What we'd like to do, and let me go here to Browse Notes.html, I'll show you what I have in mind. We want to take this search functionality and make it so that when I type something in like this and hit search, instead of it being a full request back and forth, we want this to be Ajax. So when I type something in here, we don't want a page submit, we want that to go back to our XML HTTP request, and we want this to be updated the same way. Now to do those things, we need to load some libraries in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to this component list here, and we'll see some libraries that we want to add. Now the things we want to add are the gadgets library, and that'll give us the ability to have an ajaxified input field. And then we also want to add MooTools. So we go down here to MooTools library and add that. That'll give us the button kind of capability we want. So we add those two things. Now, at this point you might ask, how did I know those were there? If I go all the way back out to the top, you notice this filters thing. Notice I don't seem to have any of these available in here. Well, if I go to filters and libraries, suddenly it'll show me libraries. If I go to filters all, it'll show me everything. And if I go to the default applications, it just shows me applications. So that's why I didn't see those before, because I wasn't actually looking for them. Now that I've loaded those in, I need to go to my Notes application, into the source code. And what I want to do is I want to change the way this thing works so that the rendering of the table is in a specific div, and that way I can update just that div. So the first thing I need to do is go up here to visibility, and I want to go up here to render details on. And I've looked at this before, which is why I know this is the method, but you can come up here into all of these methods in the superclass, and you can find that here's where the table's being rendered. So I don't have to bring this back down in visibility. I can just start entering code here, and it will save this in my subclass. It won't override what I'm doing here in the superclass unless I browse this class specifically. Keep in mind I'm still browsing Notes List UI right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the table itself, and I'm going to add a little piece of code. So I'm going to add ID : and let's just call this Notes Details. And then I'll put a semicolon, and that will add that. Notice the bolding says it's in my class, so I've still got the code in the superclass, but I've overridden it in my subclass to add that. Now let's go back and close out the visibility so that things are a little less cluttered, and we'll come back to our code. We want to go here, close this down into render actions on, and this is where we're putting our input fields and our buttons. So what we want to do here is we want to add the code to have all of this be ajaxified. And the input field is pretty simple. I'm going to change this, and you can look up documentation for gadgets to figure out how to do this. But let's put input, and we want to put a change callback on that. And this is going to take the renderer as the argument, and it's going to take the new value as the argument. So what you can do here is you can do anything with the new value and say assign it to a backend variable, call some code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call some code, self search notes. So I'm going to execute an actual search with the new value. Now I have to implement search notes, so let's go to actions and add a new method called search notes. And here in this method, I'm going to call this search criteria. And we're going to come in and we're going to add a little bit of code to do the filtering. Now, rather than have you watch me try to type this, I'm just going to explain what I did. I'm having the paginator remove any filter that was there before, and we've done this filtering before in our actual button code, so now we're just pulling that out to this method that's called dynamically. And then we add a new filter and just have it do this. Query title as lowercase like, and then our search criteria, and query description like. So it's an or condition here on either the title or the description. So that's happening dynamically every time I change that field. The only thing I need to do now is I need to change the button. So I've got the query changed dynamically, but of course I don't see the change in the query until I press the button and do something. So let's go back to render actions on, and now what I need to do is I need to change the buttons so that they work the same kind of dynamic fashion. Now keep in mind that these are inside of a form, so when I press them, by default we're going to go back to the server unless my JavaScript tells the server not to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this code here to an on click. So this is all part of MooTools, so I'm going to say HTML refresh, And then I'm going to put in a renderer as the argument, because back here we get the renderer coming in, and that's what we're going to do to render things. So I'm going to say self render details on the renderer. So what I'm doing is telling it, take that new render details on and execute just that piece of the update. So instead of updating the entire page, update just that piece, and since that piece is in its own div, it's only going to render that little piece. Then I'm going to make sure that it doesn't give me back a full page submit by doing this. On click, little JavaScript here, return false. That means the button does not actually return. And then with search. So there's my search button. And then the all button is pretty similar. So let's change this. So now here in this code, I just tell it to remove any existing filter and then re-render that piece of the page. So again, pull the filter off, re-render, I should get everything. Up here on the search, execute the search when I did the input field change, and then down here in the button press, just do whatever it says. So I'm going to come down and try to execute this now. So browse notes.html. And now let's put in something we know is here for one of these, the word tasks. So that should pull back just one of them, tasks, and hit search. And you see you get one, all, and you get all of them. And notice what's happening here. You don't see the whole page flashing. And if you look down at the bottom of the browser, which should be fully in your view, and I'll put in things, this is something that's in one of the descriptions. And if we go in here, you should see it. So there's, you see that was a whole page fresh. So you go here to close. If you look down at the bottom, you would have seen the whole page refreshing, as opposed to this, where you see just this flashing. So that's the difference between a page submit on going into one of these. That's a page submit, as opposed to a search where I do this, and I'm getting Ajax. So it gives you a basic idea how to do this, and it was pretty simple. All I had to do was come in and override this in my own subclass to add a div, come up here and add the Ajax code into this method, and have some backend supporting code for it so that I can update the backend input field from the GUI. And that update is kind of like an aspect adapter works in VisualWorks. It's just doing the on change, update the backend domain model for me, and in this case also updating the search criteria. So it turns out that if I go into variables, I'm not even using this variable anymore, because that was only used when I was submitting back to the server. I don't even need it anymore. So that's about it for today. Until next time, have fun with Smalltalk.